Hey guys, Stock Saturday, and it's been a reasonably green week for me. Up about 4.4%, about 13,000, so pretty happy with that. Against the S&P, 0.446%. It sort of rose up a little bit towards the end of the week, but it sort of came back down to a reasonably small gain for the week. Similarly on the Nasdaq, slightly larger, 0.81%, and it sort of broke 20,000 again. Everyone got excited, but yeah, it's looking reasonably good. Sort of China stimulus after the rate cut. It sort of seemed like they were maybe waiting for the rate cut to push the button. Dollar obviously come down a reasonable amount. It sort of gives them a little bit of room to push their stimulus. So yeah, everything sort of China's doing pretty well. Process sort of has rocketed up, including the FX gain and everything. Yeah, I think I'm, well, a little bit less than this actually, about 28% up. So yeah, looking pretty solid off the back of Tencent, of course, but they have been making a few sales. Sold out of a Chinese tourist sort of company. So yeah, interesting. So I've made quite a few changes this week. Glencore finally sold off. It sort of rocketed up to about 423, 424. I think I sold it at. It's gone up slightly since then, but yeah, fairly happy with that sale. It was sort of in the 370s, just a week or two ago, and sort of on this China stimulus, it's rocketed up, and I just sort of don't really like their split as much as I used to. I like the copper, but it's sort of they're 40% copper. They don't make a huge amount of margin on the copper, and then sort of the remainder is zinc, which is sort of never really a hugely profitable business. It's okay. It's not sort of due to be in massive demand going forward. Nickel, which I used to be a lot more bullish on because they had a huge sort of portion of the supply, but Indonesia have sort of really ramped up their supply, and they're sort of basically saying that they think demand will increase over the next few years, but that Indonesia can sort of meet that demand, and they see sort of prices stabilizing where they are. So looking at the H1 results for Glencore, I think they made a net loss on their nickel side. So yeah, if price is going to stay where it is, then that's a disaster basically, and not somewhere I would want to be. Even if sort of nickel prices go up 30-40% or something, they're not going to be making a huge amount of money out of it. So yeah, wasn't sort of too impressed with that side. And then obviously coal is sort of largely the remainder of Glencore, which is somewhat toxic for investors. And sort of going forward, obviously everyone's pushing nuclear and renewables, so coal isn't really a place you want to be. You could get some short-term spikes and things, but yeah, it's not something that I want to hold. So you can't just hold on to it for 40% copper. I'd rather just be in something where I like pretty much the whole mix. So yeah, Glencore went, withdrew some of the other cash that I had in there before, and that has gone into Interactive Brokers. So we'll see where things go. So no earnings this week at all, but I thought I would sort of cover a few bits of news that I saw. Riot Platforms, sort of fairly small issue they've been having with Bitfarms, still sort of trying to buy them, and they've sort of come to a bit of a settlement. One of the Bitfarms members of the board has stepped down, resigned from the board of directors, and they've appointed Amy Friedman. This sort of, it sounds like, is leaning more towards them not buying Bitfarms outright, but they do sort of have their stake, of course, and as part of this agreement, this allowed them to buy a little bit more shares. I guess they were sort of coming up on levels that Bitfarms weren't particularly happy with. Immediately prior to and immediately after, which I guess is saying they haven't bought any shares sort of in the last couple of days, but they are now up to 19.9% of ownership in Bitfarms. So not too bad, really. If they do well, that's better than sort of holding cash on the balance sheet, which they have quite a lot of. If we have, bottomed and are now looking at a bullish market for crypto miners. Got the monthly production numbers for KGHM, probably one of my favourite base metal miners, with a little bit of, half base metal, half precious metal, I suppose. But yeah, the copper number was up quite a bit, 63.4 thousand tons, which is very good, up from 58 last year. And yeah, this has been sort of one of the higher numbers for the last few months. So that's good. They show the January to August numbers, and that's slightly higher than last year as well. So pretty good. Silver with a huge drop down. They have said this is due to a maintenance shutdown at the precious metals plant, so hopefully that should be up again. And it has sort of, does mean it's taken quite a knock to the sort of January to August numbers. Hopefully that can sort of come up a little, but I guess they'll probably be looking at 45 million ounces for the year. So that's still a really good number. I think it puts them second in the world. So happy with that. This I thought was quite interesting. Both Trump and Kamala Harris talking about a national wealth fund for the US for various investments. Sounds like it's not going to be, or it wouldn't if it goes ahead, be quite the same as the sort of Norway, Saudi Arabia sovereign wealth fund type thing where they just invest in stocks. They are saying that if they were to start this idea, they would be investing in infrastructure and sort of maybe startups and sort of funding smaller projects, but for the most part it would be sort of various infrastructure investments. But I thought sort of more to the point, how are they funding it? Because Norway and Saudis and people like that run a huge sort of budget surplus. They earn far more than they spend, and so that surplus goes into investments. Obviously the US run quite a large deficit. They spend an awful lot more than they take in. So where is the money coming from for a sovereign wealth fund? Trump is saying that would come from tariffs, taxing, various sort of imports and things, and he would then put that into the sovereign wealth fund. Haven't really seen where the Democrats are saying that it would come from. Sounds like it could just be borrow it, which is sort of always something that we try and avoid. Borrowing say at 4% if rates come down a little bit more to invest is not ideal. So Trump saying this fund would be for national development projects such as highways, airports, manufacturing hubs and medical research. Whether they mean sort of funding these things directly or doing sort of funding rounds on stocks, it's unsure. But he is saying it would generate so much profit that it would help pay down the national debt. So, unsure on that. And he's saying, it would be funded with income collected from new tariffs that he plans to impose on imports. Hasn't said who would run the fund, but, there's various people being talked about. And the Biden-Harris Fund, as they're calling it, is sort of, again, looking to invest in similar things, technological preeminence, energy security, supply chain resilience. That all sounds quite vague. And they're saying they have a pool of patient and flexible capital that sort of private sector doesn't have, basically. No word really as to how it would be funded. They're talking about sort of just raising taxes and not spending that on anything in particular. How they would sort of raise even more tax and not sort of say what they're going to be spending it on is a little bit unsure. But I thought this was interesting that it's not one party saying they're going to do this. It's both parties. So you may have seen before that I do follow Real Vision quite a lot, and Julian Bittle is sort of one of their leading sort of macro experts, and he sort of focuses on global liquidity and total liquidity sort of across the world as being a great correlator for risk assets, both stocks, gold and silver, essentially, crypto. And that sort of global liquidity lifts all boats, essentially. Everything except sort of debt, cash, and the sort of risk off things like that. And yeah, it's sort of breaking out, basically. It's been in does seem to go in these little sort of narrowing wedges, and then all of a sudden breaks out. Obviously, you had this admittedly was this breakout was before COVID, worth noting, sort of late 2019 when you had the repo spike in the US. Sort of started going up, had a little bit of dip during COVID, and then you got the COVID stimulus, of course. But interesting to note, it sort of broke out slightly before COVID. You had this sort of pump in early 2016. I think that was the sort of China commodities and issues they had back in 2016, and it is just broken out of the wedge that it's been in for the last sort of few years. Whether you call this a significant breakout, it's only back where it was sort of in the banking crisis middle of last year, or sort of early last year, but it does seem like a breakout, and that sort of potentially moves Bitcoin up and gold up and stocks and everything. So I think it's looking reasonably good, and sort of something I do focus on. We also got China here as well, a little bit less of a correlation, I would say, and it's a much smaller time frame, sort of only goes back to 2022, but you can see sort of China's balance sheet assets, waxing and waning. They try and sort of tighten a little bit, and then suddenly print a load of money, and they've just started going on their mad stimulus binge. I don't even think all of this recent stimulus will be included here, but it's been sort of rocketing up through second half of 2024, and yeah, Bitcoin sort of hasn't quite woken up to it just yet, but it's broken out of sort of the lows that it was at recently. And yeah, that is sort of, again, part of the reason I've been piling quite that much money into Bitcoin miners, basically, on interactive brokers. So we'll have to see. Something else that sort of pushed me towards the miners more than anything else as well, because I'm investing in a taxable account, so I could just invest in crypto itself rather than the stocks. But the hash rate has been sort of looking quite good the last couple of weeks as well. You sort of look at the slightly longer term average, and it had been sort of rocketing up to unprofitable levels, but has sort of come down a little last sort of couple of weeks. So that does help the miners. Look at the difficulty. It has sort of just come down ever so slightly, about 4.5%. It's sort of been rocketing up quite a bit. But yeah, looking at the next adjustment, so it adjusts every 14 days. So we've just had an adjustment on Wednesday, so it'll be a little while until the next adjustment. But they do give you a prediction of where they see it at the moment, and it's looking like maybe another 4%, 3%. I expect this will come down a little bit. It was predicted at 81 yesterday, so yeah, it's just sort of early days of the new 14-day cycle. But yeah, if it comes down sort of even a couple of percent, sort of after coming down 4.5%, that's all help for the miners. Bitcoin price going up and difficulty coming down is sort of a double whammy, and 84, 85 would sort of put it back to roughly April levels, even before the halving. And sort of looking even longer term, it was 83, 84 back in March. So yeah, I thought this was positive for the miners and has been sort of getting me pushing further and further into them. Looking at a bit of economic news for the week. Monday we had some sort of PMI numbers, not the ISM that I usually like to look for, but yeah, Europe and the UK sort of looking a little bit weaker than expected. I don't think those sort of numbers usually make a huge difference. Sort of obviously relatively small markets. We had some US numbers, sort of relatively on track. Still sort of reasonably well in expansion for the US. US had sort of home sales slightly higher than expected, but nothing sort of big changes. Thursday is what everyone sort of keeps waiting for every week to try and to see unemployment claims. You know, everyone's sort of predicting US unemployment rate to go to sort of 5%, 6%, up from 4.2, I think it is now. And yeah, you would expect to see jobless claims, sort of continuing claims, people not finding jobs, and new claims sort of going up. And yeah, continuing claims were sort of up slightly, but it's been hovering around this sort of low to mid 1800s for quite a while. And initial claims down from last week and down from or down, you know, lower than expectations. And this has been going down for sort of a month or so now. So yeah, if initial claims aren't going up, there's not sort of an unusual amount of layoffs. It's sort of normally in the low to mid 200,000s. Can't see an imminent sort of spike up in unemployment. We should get that next Friday, unemployment rate and non-farm payrolls. So yeah, it doesn't look like anything's going to be horrendous in that number. And Friday we had the core PCE and PCE numbers, the Fed's sort of preferred inflation measure, all looking fairly low. Core PCE on the yearly did rise 0.1%, sort of as expected, but the monthly was a little bit lower. Not quite sure how exactly that happens, but yeah, it's sort of 0.1% growth for a month, you know, is not a lot. And headline was lower than expected, and on the yearly was lower than expected, 2.5% down to 2.2, although they do like core. So yeah, all looking sort of fairly positive, potentially leading to you know, maybe a 50 basis point rate cut again in November, because it is after the election, the next FOMC. There's one just after the election and one at Christmas. I think there is just two meetings. So yeah, we'll have to see what they do. Yeah, portfolio wise, everything's sort of looking slightly up. CleanSpark back on top. Coeur Mining sort of dropped down ever so slightly on Friday with a bit of a drop in gold and silver, but it's looking fairly positive. Yeah, they did. Coeur and Equinox both dropped 5%, and Fortuna, but nothing sort of major there. Yeah, CleanSpark sort of looking reasonably good. Still do have the REITs, American Tower and Vici, sort of been bobbling around the same sort of numbers, with the dollar sort of weakening as well. Does make the position ever so slightly worse, but you're talking sort of 100 quid, 50 quid here and there. I did get a little bit of dividend from I think the Vanguard Emerging Markets, and did actually get one from Rio Tinto, even though I sold it. Sort of sold it after ex-dividend date. So yeah, I got that dividend and put that into the ISA, bought a little bit of Hive. I think it was at 360 shares, so 420 shares here, although it sort of pales in comparison to the option side. But yeah, Riot is sort of my ISA stock, and CleanSpark, of course. On the Interactive Brokers side, it's sort of up ever so slightly. Most of that is KGHM. 40% gain on that now, looking rather nice. Pan American sort of still up and down. It was sort of in the 20s and sort of $19 range even not so long ago. So yeah, 21.45. It's been up sort of 22 odd. And of course, in my invest account, this is where the bulk of the changes have come. So off the sort of back of this China stimulus, I did sell Alibaba and Baidu a little bit too low. I could have got quite a lot more out of that, but didn't see this making quite such a large difference in the stocks. But yeah, they've certainly been sort of pumping up, and I'm not really sort of keen on holding, medium term just on the back of stimulus. I don't think sort of Chinese economy is looking particularly great, and yeah, stimulus sort of isn't going to last forever. They're sort of giving money to the less well off. I wouldn't say poor. They are a little bit more bold than sort of Western central banks. They've sort of, from what I gather, been giving money to hedge funds and buying stocks and sort of buying all sorts, really. So that has sort of caused a fair amount of bullishness. But yeah, it's not something that I would, obviously it's not going to last forever. And yeah, I thought I'm much more bullish on gold, silver and crypto still. So I thought I would take that gain, even though I could have got a bit more, and put it into the options. So I bought more Hive and Riot. That is sort of all I've been buying. Equinox sort of obviously has risen up quite a bit. It's in profit now. Kua Mining sort of rising up as well. Those are the two biggest positions, but I do expect both Hive and Riot to sort of overtake them in the next few months, as sort of hopefully crypto starts looking up. But yeah, increased those both of those quite a bit. I've been sort of happy to be buying more Hive than Riot, because obviously I don't have sort of much of any. I've got 15,000 quid's worth of options here and only 1,000 of stock in the ISA, whereas Riot, it's 13 here and I have 13 in the ISA. So yeah, quite happy to buy a little bit more Hive. I do think there is potential for a little bit more value in Hive, going forward, sort of relative market caps considered. But we'll have to see. Should have the operational updates for both next week. And yeah, Riot, I think, are going for a sort of fairly big milestone of 28 exahash. Hopefully that is all operational and not just installed. I think that would be a huge boost, and they are at over 10,000 Bitcoin now. So yeah, if Bitcoin itself is rising, if we sort of rise to a decent amount on Monday, then they should have a fairly nice sort of quarter-to-quarter gain on that. They'll report that as net profit, and even though it isn't really, but that just boosts the stock. So we'll have to see. And yeah, smaller positions, sort of not doing too bad. Himax rising sort of about 500 quid, I think, this week. Still a long way off where it was, but yeah, I didn't sort of take that opportunity to sell. Oh yeah, Core Scientific as well. That sort of rose to about 12.50 during the week. I think it is slightly below that now, and sort of yeah, off the back of sort of crypto rising slightly and just even more bullishness over this AI deal. But obviously the AI deal is a fixed price agreement over 12 months. So as Bitcoin potentially rises, that fixed price deal sort of looks less attractive, really. So Core Scientific is at quite a high market cap now. I think if you take the full the rest of the warrants that they're talking about being issued, they expect being issued shortly, it's 410 million shares. So at sort of 12, I think they're at about 12.30 they ended the day. Yeah, you're looking at sort of $5 billion market cap. So compared to something like Riot, they have 20 exahash. Riot have hopefully 28 by Monday. Core Scientific have 0 Bitcoin on the balance sheet because they have to sell it as a result of the bankruptcy rules. So yeah, no Bitcoin, lower exahash, no growth pretty much from what I can see. And then just this AI deal, which is admittedly very lucrative, but it's fixed price. And yeah, so to be double the market cap, over double the market cap, I think, of Riot, or certainly when I sold it, just seemed way over the odds to me, and a good opportunity to sell. It was good, obviously, while Bitcoin prices were lower. That fixed price deal looks very, very attractive, and we're sort of holding the price relatively high. But yeah, I think now if we're on the up, then it was time to sell. So I'm hoping that will have been a rare sort of good timing for me, because I do tend to get short-term timing fairly wrong, and long-term sort of timing I do reasonably well on, which is the way round you want it, basically. Short-term, as I say, sort of selling Alibaba and Baidu, sort of fairly poor timing, but if I've put it into something that does well over the long term, then it was still a good sale. So we'll see. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and like and subscribe. See you soon.